house needs painting, the grass needs mowing. Where's he at?
Hi, this is Hank. Sorry I missed your call. Leave me your name and your number and I'll get back to you.
He's gone fishing.
Welcome to Off the Water with Hank Parker. I'm your co-host, Sarah Beth, and you are?
I'm Hank Parker, and I'm glad we're doing this podcast. I'm glad to have you here with me, Sarah Beth. It's a new year. How about that?
It is a new year.
2025.
What do you think 2025 was going to look like?
I think 2024 was a good year, but there was a lot of stuff I didn't get done, so I'm carrying it over to 2025. Oh, no.
Yes.
But it's all good. We're excited. We get to fish for a living. How awesome is that?
Hey, you're living the dream. Most people wish that they had.
I'm living the dream. Sometimes it's a nightmare, but most of the time it's a good dream. You know, dreams come in two forms, good ones and bad ones.
Good and bad, nightmares and dreams. That's true. All right, well, we've been talking about history for what feels like the entire first season of this podcast. Let's talk a little bit about the future and the present, where we're at now and where you see us going, maybe some technology that you foresee maybe coming to, maybe some techniques that you feel like are
There
new.
was a song years ago. It said, one of the lines in the song says, there is no future in the past.
That's true.
But there's a lot to learn from the past. And so what really intrigued me to do this podcast is the fact that I've been here for the whole process of the explosion of bass fishing. So I really like talking about the history. But yeah, let's talk about the present. We're in a new year, a good time of the year to go catch a big fish. A lot of people don't fish in the wintertime and they're missing the boat.
Because it's cold.
It is cold, but you got good clothing and you can bundle up and stay warm and go fishing.
It's 30 degrees outside. I don't leave my house. If it's below 40 degrees, I'm not leaving.
Oh, come on, Sarah Beth. You're missing out on some big bass. A great time of year to catch a big one. So,
I'll just watch you do it on TV.
Okay, well, that's good. You know, I appreciate that. Now I know that where my one viewer comes from.
Yeah. Speaking of, you just started airing your TV shows now on the Pursuit Up channel, right?
Pursuit Up, we've been there for about 5 years now. But what they have done, Pursuit Up, if you've got a Samsung TV and maybe a Vizio now, it comes preloaded with Pursuit Up. You have to go through your menu and find it. But you don't have to have a cable channel or cable agreement. You don't have to have Dish Network or anything. It is in that Samsung TV built in. So Pursuit Up, and what they used to do at the Pursuit channel was they would let you see on Pursuit Up, which is their streaming free of charge channel, that they would let you see that the next year. So then they changed that to 6 months. Then they changed that to 3 months because Pursuit Up has actually got a broader viewer base and way more opportunity. Over half the TVs in America are Samsung.
Yeah.
Samsung. So if you look at that, over half the people in America have got Pursuit Up for free, and it's already downloaded, no cable necessary. Boom, you just pop it up and you can watch it. So now, if my show airs the first week of January, the third week of January, you can watch it on Pursuit Up.
Well, get this. You don't even need a TV. You can download the app on your phone and watch it that way, too.
All these apes, that's way ahead of my time.
Apes.
You know, let's go back and talk about the past. All these apps. I call them apes, and golly, Mom, it's just so much technology that's overwhelming to an old man, you know.
All that technology came out years ago. Whenever I was probably 3.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Sarah Beth said one time, we were talking about the old days, she said, oh, Lord, Papa, you talking about old times. That was way back in the 90s.
Back in the 1900s, as people call them now.
The 90s is current news to me, man. I haven't moved on from the 90s, so... But okay, let's talk about what's going on in today's fishing world. Man, there are so many lures and so many, so much tackle, and it is, again, we've talked about this in the past, it's almost overwhelming to these kids, but it's almost overwhelming to these veterans, these guys that are old timers. It is so much out there, and a lot of people listen to what other people say about this particular bait or that particular bait, and they make their buying decisions kind of based on what they hear and what they read and what they see on their
device.
Yeah, their handheld device.
On their not TVs.
Yeah, on their, what is that called, an app?
Their apps.
On their apps.
On their apps.
On their apes, they see it. So that's how they make their decision. When I grew up, there were so many people that saw a need. We talk about a fishing lure being a tool. There were so many people that saw a need for a bait to do a certain thing. There were all these lure designers and all these baits that were being developed, hand carved out of balsa wood or made out of cedar, or even some plastic baits. And the people were designing baits to fit a need. And now there's almost everything out there. But I want to circle the wagons a little bit. There was a guy on Lake Wiley where I fished and grew up. It took a big Cordell, 1 ounce Cordell hotspot, and poured lead in the nose. And that thing would set up, it would nosedive. And you'd throw it out there, you know, I think they call it strolling. About 15 years ago, 10 years ago, there was a tournament won in Tennessee where a guy would cast a bait as far as he could cast it. And then he would hit his trolling motor. He'd mark his little spot, put a marker buoy on the underwater island or the point, the tip of the point he was trying to reach. And he'd mark it. So he'd throw that bait as far as he could throw it. And then he'd get on his trolling motor and he'd pull out as much line as he could. And he might even put out 150 yards of line. And that would allow him to get that crankbait much, much deeper than he could get it on a cast.
So this is with the leaded?
No,
Without.
This was a crankbait. This was without. So that was strolling. Well, that became pretty popular. And this guy on Lake Wiley that came up with this idea of lead in this hot spot, you didn't have to stroll. Man, you could cast and that thing would sink like a rock. And you could throw it out there in 30 foot of water. And you fished it like a tailspin bait, like a little George or something of that nature. You'd raise your rod and that bait would come off the bottom and you'd feel it vibrate up and then you'd feel it vibrate down. Well, man, he killed them. Golly bum, he killed them. And I would watch him. You know, I was pretty good back in those days on Lake Wiley, and I was one of the first guys, I would say one of the first guys that came up with fishing crankbaits on deep water ledges. You know, Mans came out with a 20-plus crankbait. Jack Davis designed it, was an awesome bait. Bagley had some DB3s, and we would lead the nose of those DB3s to get them down a little bit deeper. And man, we were catching a lot of fish and bigger fish. You know, everybody had traditionally fished those humps and hills and islands and long extended points with plastic worms, Carolina rig or whatever, jigging spoons. And now we run a big crankbait. Those fish never seen that before, so we could catch them. Well, this guy that leaded this hot spot, what he did is he eliminated that need for strolling. He eliminated for making a 150-yard cast to get that 20-foot crankbait 25 feet. And so he could fish a water column that we could not reach. And I watched him on several occasions. And again, I was pretty darn good, and I took a lot of pride. I won quite a few tournaments there, and I won a national tournament there, one of the biggest national tournaments that American Bass ever had was on Wiley, and I won that thing with like 60 pounds, and second was like 30 pounds, so I doubled the field, so I'm a prideful person. I got to pat myself on the back, you know. But anyway, I was pretty good, and I watched this guy wear me out. I mean, he's catching them on places that I just fished, and he's further out than I am, and he's catching these fish, and it was all because he saw a need to get a bait deeper. And he came up with that idea. Now, the whole deal of leading those hot spots, I used to do it. You had to get a 5-gallon bucket of sand and moisten the sand, put the bait down in there, pour the lead, or it'd swell the bait up when you put all that hot lead in that plastic. And so I wasn't good at it at all. I'd pour 10 and I'd get 2 that would work. So with that being said, what an awesome bait that was. And so I was fishing with a buddy of mine, and that tournament up on Douglas in Tennessee is where that strolling came into effect. And the reason I remember it well, it was very controversial because you can't troll in a tournament. People say, well, he was trolling. Well, he was not trolling. He was using his trolling motor to let line out, but he wasn't dragging his lure with his troll motor, so he was not trolling. So the controversy died, and it became a technique and a method that a lot of people still use today. But I was fishing with a super duper fisherman. We were on Lake Monticello, a lake I fished on, and he said, man, that strolling has been a big deal. It's helped me catch fish out here on this underwater island that I hadn't been able to reach before, because now I can drag that crankbait and get it down there 5 or 6 foot deeper where I needed to be all along, and I've never been able to get there.
Right.
And I said, well, let me show you a little trick. So I pulled out one of those leaded hot spots, and I began to wear them out. The first fish I caught was like a 7-pounder, and he's about to go nuts, because he was really serious about it. And we caught 5 or 6 really big fish on that lead nose hot spot. So I say all that to circle the wagons. Those things were hard to come by and hard to find, and they were hard to make. And again, I'd pour 10 of them, and I'd get 2 that work, So 1 out of 5, you'd throw the rest of them in the trash because you destroyed them because you swole them up and they wouldn't run properly. So I had the bright idea to go back in history for the future now. I'm talking about history for future. You can learn from the past.
I know where this is going.
Yeah, you can learn from the past. And I thought about that, and I'm thinking about, how the big 1 ounce hot spot worked a lot better than the ½ ounce for some reason. And I'm looking at that, and I think it's because of the flotation, and the bigger bait puts off more vibration. And so when you compact that in that smaller bait, you don't get that vibration that you need. You don't get that tight wiggle. So I thought, man, I got these pawpaws, and I've got a slow sinker, a fast sinker, and a floater. I bet you could take that floater and lead the nose and make an awesome bait like that old hot spot and bring that thing to market. Now I'm thinking like the old days. I'm thinking of a need. There is a need for this bait. There's no bait like this. There's nothing out there that competes with it. So I could take that pawpaw, and I could put a lead nose in it, and I could make that thing an effective bait to do things that I don't have a bait that will do.
Right.
So I took it to a lure maker, friend of mine, who I'm blown away at all the stuff he's working on. He's got tanks there. They're working on floating jig heads and all sorts of stuff, and he's just a mastermind. And again, it's all these people that bring to him ideas. I like this bait that so-and-so makes, but it'd be a better bait if we could do this with it, if it would do this, if we could make the tail float, if we could do whatever. So they're designing baits to do a job because the people who are fishing are thinking about what they need to be more effective, to make a better tool.
Well, I think that need is never going to go away. Like we were talking before, that how bass behavior has changed over the years. So who's to say 5 to 10 years from now, they don't start changing up their patterns. So then you're going to have to start using different baits, different methods to catch them, because they're starting to catch on.
That's
to the old
exactly,
ones,
absolutely. I talked about that before when the buzzbait came out. I went to a farm pond. I think I caught every fish in it, and I thought, man, this thing ought to be illegal. We're going to deplete the bass, the whole resource. And so then the next time I go back, I catch half as many. And it wasn't long, about 15 trips to the lake. I couldn't get them to touch it. So they caught on pretty quick. And it's that way every time a new lure comes out. I remember David Fritz when he brought that Fritz Side 5 out. Golly, but they've wised up to it, and you keep changing and moving, and that's true with every bait that's been. But this hot spot deal, it never made the market. And so I've built me a prototype floating pawpaw with a leaded nose, and I went to test it the other day, and I caught a fish on the very first cast. And I thought, man, we got something. But I really think it works better. It's a little smaller, But I use the floating model, and man, when I pull that thing, I feel it vibrate good, and then I feel it vibrate back down to the bottom. And it's going to be a very, very effective bait. So we're going to bring that bait out. But the point that I'm making is people design lures because they saw a need.
Right.
And now there's so many lures that the whole gamut is pretty much covered, with some exceptions. That bait that I'm just fixing to bring to market is an exception to that. So you don't see as many lure makers as you used to. You don't see all the homemade balsa wood, Big O's, and those sorts of things that you saw during my career. So fishing has changed, and it's an overload of design. And understanding what those baits do is a big deal. My wife, Martha, hates a swimming pool. I built a swimming pool because of kids and grandkids. And it was a way to get the grandkids to come hang out with you, in the summertime. They don't want to come to Union, South Carolina, where it's 100 degrees. But if you got a swimming pool, you could kind of entice them, And so I used it for leverage. Well, now the kids have all grown up like you. You used to come swim all the time. I
still do. Yes, I did.
Yeah,
this past summer.
Twice.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to go out there by yourself, it's not really as fun.
Yeah, okay, twice. I think the swimming pool was used about 10 times all summer long. So.
Hey, you have a place to demo your baits.
Now that's my point. I love my swimming pool because that's where I go out and I look at baits, and I lay all these baits out and I watch them and I see what they do. I got a little camera. I got a little underwater camera. I can hear them. I can view them. I can see what they do from different angles. I can see them if a fish was on the bottom, I can look at it, what a fish would see them do if he was on the surface. And so I can figure out all these different baits.
That's cool.
And so now I understand. If you go to a tackle shop, let's say you go to a Bass Pro Shop, and man, at all the baits they have. It is just so many baits. Well, about at least half are duplicates of other brands. They do the same thing. So it's not necessary to buy, like this Arc. You take this Arc lipless crankbait. This is an unusual bait.
Okay.
It has a different wobble than any of the other baits. It's more compact. This is one of the best lipless crankbaits I've ever fished in my life. But it has a complete different wobble than a rattle trap, completely different from a hot spot, and all the other brands that are on the market. So I see that in my swimming pool. So that's a unique bait, so I'm going to buy that bait.
Okay.
Then I go look at 15 other baits, and they all do exactly the same thing. So I don't need to buy all these different brands. I just need one.
Just one.
And so understanding what a lure does is a big deal. Understanding the benefit. And then I'm a tweaker. I always have been, and I grew up in an era where there were so many different lure makers. And I worked with so many of them, and it's kind of a passion for me. And I've always said 99 is not a good number if 100 is achievable. If you can make it better, let's make it better. I want it to be the very best it can possibly be. So I tweak a lot. And I change this, and I change that, and I improve this, and I do this. And so we're losing that because so much stuff is out there. And not everybody has a swimming pool. And we made a rule, if you catch a kid under 10 years old, you got to throw him back.
That's true.
But you got to understand what your lure does. And so I tweak because I think it gives me an advantage over the fish because I make a bait a little bit better. And able to be able, not to enable, to be able to understand how effective a bait is for certain situations, you got to understand what the bait does. And so fishing them in clear water, a swimming pool, is a big deal to understand that bait.
Right.
A lot of people don't understand it. And there's just too many baits out there. There are a lot of baits. You ask me about a certain bait, and you call it by name, and you say, what do you think about that bait? I hadn't got around to trying it yet.
Right.
I mean, there are so many, you can literally go broke buying all these different baits. But I don't like, my boat weighs 400 pounds more than anybody else's Z-boat because I got the Bass Pro Shop in my boat.
He does. He really does. He's not exaggerating.
I hate not having something. If I had this little such and such and such and such, I know I could catch them, and I'm digging all through. I know it's in here somewhere. I got it. So I have to find it.
Well, that's valid, though, because, I mean, every lake is different. You know, you don't just pick a tool because it's a tool to go fix a leak under a sink. Like, you're not going to take a screwdriver. You're going to grab, most likely, a wrench. So it's knowing what tool to have. You're going to need your whole tool kit to assess a problem if you don't know what the problem is.
That's well put, and that's exactly right. And so that's what I want to understand, what every bait, I don't want to leave anything laying on the table, because many times I get in a situation, I can't catch fish.
Right.
I see them. I know they're there. Sometimes they'll come up schooling and chasing bait, and I can't get a bite. What's going on? What's wrong? I need a bait that'll do this or that or the other. And so I want to dig around in my boat and find that bait. And sometimes that bait does not exist. So you got to make that bait, like that lead-node pawpaw. There's not a bait out there that'll do what that bait will do, so I made it. Now I got a bait that solves the problem. I got a tool, a specialized tool for a certain
that job, right?
Situation. Yeah. And so that are the things that I enjoy doing. Sometimes on these really cold days, I was going fishing the other day and test my pawpaw, and it was a 30-mile-an-hour wind. It's about 35 degrees, so I decided to go to the pond. And I go in my little workshop, and I get on my workbench, and I think about situations I was in last year, and I was using this, and I was doing that, and I thought, God, if I could have got that bait to do this. So I start tweaking and trying to redesign to make baits to do things that I need them to do to solve a problem. And so I encourage people to understand what your bait does, understand the opportunity. We talk about forward-facing sonar, and I don't want to talk about the controversial side of it. There is a place for forward-facing sonar for everybody. There's got to be a balance. So we've already gone and opened that can of worms many times. And I'm not against forward-facing sonar. I enjoy fishing with it. But some of these kids that are really good with it, they really think a lot. And I'll be honest with you, I was at a terrible disadvantage. I didn't even know how bad of a disadvantage I was. I used Humminbird, and Humminbird's Mega Live was not nearly as effective, and it didn't perform like some of the other brands.
I've seen the comments. I have totally seen the comments. Everybody's saying you need to go with Garmin. You need to go with Garmin.
I didn't want to say that word, but you did, and that's fine.
And they can come for me. It's fine.
They make a great product. But Humminbird now's got Mega 2, and I see what I've been missing. I mean, golly bump. But saying all that, just because you see that fish don't mean you can catch him. And you got to think, hovering, getting above that fish, that's the big key to be an effective fisherman with forward-facing sonar, in my opinion, from what I see. And again, I'm telling you, I'm not the best at it, but I've gotten schooled pretty good. I've fished with people that have competitive brands to what I use, and I realize, man, my shortcomings, both in my experience and the equipment I'm using. So now I'm on a level playing field for the first time. And I'm looking at the fish, and I'm looking at my bait. And I'm watching how these fish react. And I'm telling you, if you get that bait at the same level that the fish are, the odds of you catching that fish are pretty slim. If you keep it above their head, the odds of catching them are pretty darn good. But now you got to get the right shape, the right size, and the bait moving at the right speed. And you can watch how these fish react. Well, Berkeley's come out with a new fishing line called Forward. Well, I'm going to tell you, go back in the past, 40 years ago when Berkeley came out with their first braided line, it was called Gorilla Braid. And they wanted me to go to a Clearwater lake, so I went to the Great Lakes, and they wanted me to have another fisherman, same caliber same skill level as I have. And they wanted me to fish in the front of the boat with a gorilla braid for 1 hour using the exact same lure. And the guy in the back of the boat fish with trilene monofilament for 1 hour. And then we would rotate. I'd leave my rods and reels in the front with the gorilla braid on it, and he would leave his rods and reels in the back of the boat with the monofilament.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in the front of the boat with the gorilla braid, now I was throwing like 12 thousandths diameter, which would be like 12-pound mono, and he was throwing 12-pound mono in the back, so they were pretty much equal in diameter. And he would catch 10 fish to my 1 out of the back of the boat.
Wait a minute, who was it?
I can't tell you that.
You can't tell me?
No. I don't have a disclaimer.
Man.
He might. But then when we would rotate, I'd catch 10 to his 1. Now, everybody says there's a big advantage of being in the front of the boat, and sometimes there is. But the point is, it didn't matter whether you was in the front of the boat or the back of the boat. When you tied your line directly to the gorilla braid, you didn't catch as many fish as you did, so the fish saw it. So now I got this big stigma about bass seeing my braided line.
Yeah, the lines. You talked about that before.
Oh, it drives me crazy now. I saw Randy Blockett say, he's tested it and it didn't make any difference. I can't get over that. I spent 4 days on the Great Lakes testing, and I saw that firsthand with my own eyes, and I was a part of that project, and my evaluation, my conclusion at the end of the evaluation process was you need clear line going to your lure. So tie a uni knot or whatever kind of knot. What was the knot we were trying to tie? It drove me crazy.
I think it was the Texas.
No, Kate.
No.
Oh, God, I can't even think.
I don't remember. I just know it was
drove
difficult.
me nuts trying to tie it anyway. But there's so many. I tie my braided line to a fluorocarbon line, and I use a uni knot, and it works for me. It's not the best, but it works, and it's easy to tie, and I can get it done. Not easy, but easier. But anyway, point I'm making is now Berkeley's come out with this new line called Forward. Well, it's a braided line, and they have it in a green tint that it's almost invisible when you use like 10-pound line. 10-pound line's like 6 thousandths diameter, or maybe less. The fish absolutely don't see it, but it floats. It floats. I've been fishing with forward-facing sonar and all these baits trying to keep them above the fish's head with a neutral line, a line that does not float, trilene 100% fluorocarbon. And that's the line I would use. Well, now I'm using this Forward, and I've been testing it. It's fixing to come on the market, or it has just been introduced. It's just weeks away if it hasn't been put on the market as of yet. They were going to launch it in January, so it should have just now hit the market.
Right.
It's called Forward, and it floats, and it is super duper sensitive. It is it's a hybrid braid. It's made out of a different material. I don't even know how to explain it, but I've been using it, and it's amazingly strong. It holds a great knot, but it helps me keep that bait above those fish at the right speed. When I fished with fluorocarbon, I'd have to fish it faster than I wanted to a lot of times to keep it in that strike zone above those fish. And now I can fish almost at whatever speed I want. And it makes a huge difference. I'm blown away at being able to keep that bait above those fish is so important. And that's where I was talking about this lure designer I went to the other day. He's using a floating jig head and then adding tungsten to the back of it and getting just the right amount for whatever minnow he's putting on that bait to be able to keep that bait above their heads. And in the wintertime when they're lethargic, you can't fish that thing so fast. They don't want it. They don't want to exert all that energy in that cold water to come after it.
They're like me. They don't leave the home.
They
don't want to leave home if it's cold.
They're sitting by the fire.
Yeah, absolutely. I would too.
So those are the kind of things, little bitty things. Everywhere you go, people want you to pull out a bait when you do a fishing seminar, pull out a bait and say, hey, if you'll use this bait right here, the fish will come out with their fins up. I mean, all you gotta do is pull it out. You're gonna win the tournament every time. This is a magic bait. Everybody wants a magic bait.
And which one is that? It's the Arc Lipless.
Yeah.
Isn't there? There's a name to it though.
Yeah, it's a great bait, but I'm gonna be honest with you, it is not. You can't just tie it on and they gonna all surrender.
Right.
You got to work at it.
Yeah.
You got to catch them. But that's the information they want. But it's little things added together that make a big difference. If you go to, and I had the privilege both at Bass and I've had the privilege at FLW to stand on the dock at checkout in the mornings when all the contestants are going out to fish the Classic or the Forest Wood Cup. They all got the same baits. I mean, they all got the same stuff. Now, it might be different brands, but basically they've all got the same tools to do the job. Some of them are going to zero, not catch a fish. Some of them are going to load the boat. So it's not necessarily the bait. The bait's a big part, but where you put that bait and how you fish it. You can fish all day long with forward-facing sonar and run that bait underneath the fish or get it on the same level and not get a bite. And the guy beside of you, just like the guy on Lake Wiley that took that lead nose hot spot, was wearing me out because I wasn't getting to the fish he was catching. And when I did get to him, I didn't have the right wiggle.
Well, it comes full circle. The bait doesn't make the fisherman. The fisherman, well, it falls on the person doing it.
It's like a hand and a glove.
Yeah, I guess so.
You got to have a glove to keep your hands warm, but if you don't have a hand, you don't need a glove.
Yeah, true.
So it all works
True.
together, and you got to be able to put it together. And the more effectively you can put it together, the more successful you can be. And that's no different between, we're not talking about the past, we're talking about the present, we're talking about the future. It's all the same. It is no different. You got to have the right lure, make the right presentation to catch the fish.
Right.
And that's probably more difficult today than it was 25 or 30 years ago because there's more pressure on the lakes. We're not building new lakes like we used to. The Corps of Engineers would have a new lake or a new project going all the time, and now we're fishing the same lakes over and over and over again. So more and more pressure, and it's necessary to have more expertise to be able to catch these fish. And these guys that are really good with this forward-facing sonar, they've proved that. They've proved it. They've caught bigger strings of fish than we ever caught, and using a complete different technique in a different pattern than we've ever fished before. So it's all about, in today's time, it's all about, just as it was 50 years ago, figuring out the right lure, the right location, and making the right presentation to catch that fish.
Well, technology is always going to adapt to the conditions and the climate of the fish, or whatever it is that you're like. I feel like that's true for hunting too. Technology is going to adapt to whatever condition it's put underneath. So I mean, same for forward-facing sonar. I feel like that is just an adaptation of the behavior of the bass. Well,
people think, what if I had this, if I had that, and I like that, and that's so. Technology is solving a problem. I've always told Humminbird, I've worked with them for 40 plus years, and I've always said, don't give me an innovative idea and develop some technical advancement on a product that does not do me any good. I don't care if you can do this or that or the other. If it doesn't benefit me as a fisherman, I don't want it. So technology, there's so much out there that's not necessary, and there's so much out there that's beneficial. The main thing is, hey, I'm a fisherman. And I want whatever you could come up with to help me catch more fish and be more effective. You know, people say, well, fishing's not all about catching. Well, I agree with that. It is not all about catching, but I promise you, I've fished and not caught them, and I fished and caught them. I have more fun when I'm catching.
I think that's most people.
Well, I do too, you know, so I want to catch them. I don't want to go out there and zero, and you have to stay close to the mic or people will write us,
All right.
write us letters and say, tell Sarah Beth to get closer to the mic. I like to catch them, so it's more difficult to catch them today than it was 25, 30, 40 years ago. So you've got to keep advancing. You've got to keep technology in the game. Mm-hmm. You know, there were a lot of complaints from the old bank beaters in the 50s when Tom Mann developed the hummingbird. Mm-hmm. They didn't think that was fair. And then they thought you were crazy for fishing out in the middle of the lake. My dad always had a trouble with that. Son, you're going to stop out here in the middle of the lake. I said, Dad, there's an underwater island there. How you know it is? I said, because I'm looking at these little lights on this hummingbird, and you see where it's 25? Look here. It ain't but 10 feet deep right here. So we're in the middle of the lake. I said, I know we are. And you telling me it ain't but 10 foot? I don't believe. How you know that thing's right? I said, well, throw your little rubber worm out there, Dad, and see how long it takes it to sink. My Lord, son, it ain't deep at all. I thought we was out here in the middle. I thought it'd be 100 feet deep. I know. So it blew people's mind, you know, you're out in the middle of the lake. But out in the middle of the lake, there's islands, there's humps.
Mm-hmm. Just because you're in the middle doesn't mean it's the deepest part of the lake, is what you're saying.
So there's structure out there. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of bank beaters that complained, you know, about, man, that ain't fair. They got these lights that show them how deep the water is. So technology has always been criticized. And, hey, I'm an old man. We don't like change. It is not our nature to change. But I tell you, if you'll embrace change to your advantage, it's exciting and makes it fun. David Bashir with Fish Formula, he told me, he said, you know, before forward-facing sonar came out, I was struggling so bad, I just about quit crappie fishing. I just was not doing good. He said, now, man, it renewed my interest. I am fired up. I can't wait because I can catch them. And so catching fish is important. And the more you know and the more technology you're able to use, you know, the better you're going to be. But you got to keep it balanced. And that's the struggle with a lot of innovative ideas that cost a lot of money, that kind of infringes on the growth of the sport. You got to keep that balanced. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm not an expert on that.
Right.
I have my opinion, but...
well, I mean, at least before you criticize something, either try it or go see it in person. Like, I'm sure there's a way you could connect. It's like if people can't afford it, I'm sure they could probably find somebody that does have it just to try it out or something, you know. I feel like most people that try to form an opinion or that are in the comments section haven't even seen one of those in person or haven't messed with it at all. So, you know, they're forming an opinion based off of something that they have very little knowledge on. Well,
let me defend their position, even though it may not be my position, but let me share you the flip side of that.
Their mentality.
What a lot of these critics are looking at is what it is doing to the sport. They've seen that the non-boaters are no longer participating because they're observers and they're in the back. They don't get to see what you see, and so you park them out in the middle of the lake.
They're getting outfished.
They don't have a chance. They're just out. So there's a valid point. It's not as if they haven't tried it. It's what they see is happening to the sport, and some part of it is alarming. So we need to consider all angles and all points of views. And I get it. I totally get both sides. And I was a little bit negative in the beginning, and I've softened because I've talked to a lot of these high school kids. My desire for the future of our sport is to do everything that I can to encourage kids to get outside. Put that cell phone down. I know it's wonderful. I know it's opened a lot of doors. I know there's apes out there that you can watch my show on. I know all that. But it's also can be very destructive. I I see so much deterioration in outdoor activities. And hey, God created the outdoors and gave us dominion. And I'm so much more aware of how awesome God is when I'm looking at the sky, when I'm looking at the lake, when I'm a part of the outdoors, way more than I am when I'm sitting on a couch with a handheld device playing a game.
Right. Well, I just think it's a little scary where even like our future generations are going. Like now they have AI chatbot things that people are. Oh, well, I'm serious. There's kids now that talk more to AI than they do real people. And I mean, that's just the reality of where we're going. So it's like if these kids can get a chance to get out and see that there's more to life than a screen, it's pretty great.
Don't go to AI, you fry my little 72-year-old brain. That can't handle it. And I'm only 71, by the way, but I got 2 more months. But anyway, you fry my little brain. Golly, bomb. I don't even know what to say. AI, artificial intelligence.
It's scary where it's going. Even Elon Musk, he said he's terrified of it, like seeing from his own creations, like he doesn't want any part of it. So for somebody who is a big engineer into that world to say, hey, we need to stop, that should tell you something.
Yeah, I haven't explored that a whole lot. I go fishing.
Right.
But that's what I want. That's what I really want to do. I want to help kids get in the outdoors. And the more you fish and the more you spend time outdoors, the more you appreciate what we have, and the better steward you'll be. You're interested. If you don't fish, you're not really interested in the population of fish. So from a conservation standpoint, my buddy Toxie Hayes at Mossy Oak has always said, man, we need more hunters than we ever had. We need to continue to recruit, because hunters are the greatest conservationists to preserve what we love to do. And without them, everything falls by the wayside, and there's nobody out there that's taking care of our resources.
It's going to die out. Right.
So we need these kids. We need them, and selfishly, we need them to preserve the future of the sport. But just being fair and honest and truthful, I think we need it for mental health for these kids. I think they need to get outdoors and do things. And so that's where this whole Huckleberry apparel and fundraising opportunities and all the things that we've tried to create, I single-handedly took on the industry and said, hey, guys, we got high school fishing teams out there that are shutting down from lack of funds. Let's do something to help them. And so that's how all this came about. But putting that aside, not even talking about the fundraising opportunity, talking about mental health of our kids. Where are we going? What are we doing to offset? There's always a balance. And with all this technology and these handheld cell phones that these kids have, there's no counter over here. There's nothing that you can offer them that trumps their ability to have everything at their fingertips through that cell phone. But it's not all real. It's not all tangible. Watching a bobber go under, that's real.
It is.
That's
you can
tangible.
see it, yep.
Yeah.
You see it, feel it.
Yeah, getting wet and getting cold, that's tangible.
Right.
Being sunburned, that's tangible.
Oh.
Get outside. Do things that are real and not all artificial.
Right. Well, my fiance, Matt, he's taken it upon himself to do research into some of these high school teams, trying to reach out and to let them know about what we're doing with Huckleberry. And a lot of these teams are registered, but he'll call and they've been disbanded either because of lack of funds or nobody's offering to take these kids out on the water. So they're losing these opportunities, or some of these teams that they had put together, these kids are losing out. So if you are on a high school fishing team, if you're a coach, if you know somebody who is even collegiate fishing, Huckleberry could work for all of them. And I feel like it's a great resource to get those funds back and so that these kids can have a chance.
I just was contacted a day or two ago from a school that has an ice fishing team there in Wisconsin. And they said, hey, can we be a part of this program? I said, absolutely. Any fishing team, I don't care if you're ice fishing, I don't care if you're a carp fishing team. It really,
Yeah.
I just want to be able to get these kids funded and keep them on the water and outside and off the cell phone. And what you just said earlier about Matt contacting a lot of these teams, this is something that our industry has kind of kept undercover. I don't say swept it under the rug. They just have not addressed it. So many teams start up, they get going, and then they run out of money and they shut down. And it's alarming to me in this state of South Carolina as I got a list of all the fishing teams in the state,
Right.
thanks to Matt,
Yeah.
how many have disbanded because of lack of funds.
There have been at least 8 that he knows of where they're still registered online. And so he'll call, and then whoever it is at the school will answer the phone and say they've been disbanded for 8 months, or there hasn't been a team for over a year. And I mean, we've had at least 8 so far. And
I
counting.
want to stop that. I want to put a stop to that. I want to get these kids out on the water, and I want to grow it. I want it to be an avenue that people can get involved and build a career. You know, all these kids have dreams. Every little kid that I know of that played Little League baseball had wanted to be a major league player someday.
Right.
Pop Warner football, they want to be in the NFL someday. A guy fishing competitively in a bass club, he wants to be a Major League Fishing or BASS Classic champion one day. Dreams, man. Forrest Wood at Ranger Boats, Forrest said one time that he had so many quotes that were so awesome, but my favorite Forrest Wood quote was, "It's no use to dream if you're not going to work, and it's no use to work if you're not going to dream." So I love the opportunity for these kids that they have today that are fishing high school and have a dream of becoming a professional and opening those doors. And man, dreams are awesome. And to be able to pursue your dream, I'm one of those guys. I have lived that. I came from a very poor family. I had very little opportunity. I don't have a great education. I didn't have so many things that I could do or get involved in, and I didn't want them. I wanted one thing. I wanted to be a professional bass fisherman. That was my dream. I live in America, and I'm dreaming that someday I'm going to have a Ranger boat like Blake Honeycutt. I'm dreaming that someday I can be like Bobby Murray and stand on the stage and Ray Scott say, "Hank Parker, Denver, North Carolina, world champion." I dreamed of that. And I live that dream, and how awesome. And I want every American kid today to have the opportunity for that same dream.
That's awesome.
So let's make America great again. Let's make fishing great again. Let's get this thing going. Let's keep these schools working, and let's keep these guys funded, and let's keep opportunities and doors open. Our sport depends on it. Our industry depends on it. But so do our resources, conservation. Those are our future conservationists. So let's don't let it all go by the wayside. So that is the future. That is the present. That has nothing to do with the past.
Nothing to do with the past. We got through one whole episode without talking about the past. Somewhat. But also those links to Huckleberry Apparel and some of those high school fishing forums, collegiate fishing forums, those will be in the description of the videos, both on Spotify and YouTube. So.
All right. Well, let's be sure and tell them also about the Mercury sweepstakes where you can repower your boat. You can win a Mercury outboard, and we'll give you a link that you can go to. And I'm going to tell you, we're getting down to the wire on this thing. And the loser, there's 3 contestants in this thing. Bill Dance, you've heard of him. Bill Dance. He wears that T hat I got back here. I got 2 hats back there, and they're both my heroes. One was Dale Earnhardt. The other is Bill Dance. So both are my heroes. So my hero is going to put a pie in my face if I don't get the most guys to register to win this Mercury outboard. And the other is Jimmy Houston. And I love Jimmy. But can you imagine how much giggling he's going to do? I mean, that's going to go on for an hour when he puts a pie in my face. So register to win a free Mercury outboard up to 300 horsepower.
Right.
Go to this link and you'll register under my name where I don't get the pie in the face. And that's a big deal to me.
Right.
So,
That link will be next to the Huckleberry ones. All you have to do is click the link. It's completely free to do. You just fill out the information, and just by clicking his link, it automatically goes towards Hank.
it votes for me.
Yeah, so
Vote
you don't
for
have to
me.
choose.
Vote for me.
Vote Hank.
All right. I like that. All right. So, Beth, tell everybody goodbye.
All right, bye. See you guys next week.
We appreciate you joining us, and I hope you'll join us again next week. God bless you. See you later. Thank you.